May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, dear God. Please be seated. If you were asked to summarize in one word the entire message of all the Gospels, what would that word be? Maybe your word is love. Or maybe your word is life. Yes, both these words are true and helpful and encouraging. Then there's some other words, like forgiveness. In the reading from Genesis, Joseph demonstrated the most remarkable forgiveness to his brothers, who had so callously tried to get rid of him. The generosity of spirit which Joseph showed to his brothers is inspiring. Forgiveness is a tricky concept for us. What exactly does it mean to forgive someone? I don't think it's any trickier for us today than it was for the people around Jesus all those years ago. And the implications are just as complicated and deep. So this gospel we heard today follows on from last week's gospel, in which Jesus described the ways in which we should act in our faith communities. Specifically, how to work through conflicts and challenges. That relationships in this family of God are the most important things in the world, and that those who are part of this family are to do everything in their power to nourish and strengthen the bonds of this love. In this week's gospel, Peter acts like a cheeky student who, when asking Jesus a question, already thinks he knows the answer. Lord, how many times should I forgive someone who has done wrong to me? And Peter thinks he's clever, because the answer spiritually is known for Jewish people. They are required to forgive someone 3 times. 3 is the number, and it happens so often in our Bible. So Peter thinks, I'll just double it and add an extra 1 for generosity. Then Jesus does his extraordinary and surprising thing by saying, 7 times? Are you kidding me? 77 times. It is a ridiculous and uncountable number, which means we are to forgive each and every time we feel wronged. Grace and forgiveness does not have limits with God, and neither should it have limits between us. And always an unending depth of forgiveness. Is that even possible for humans? Jesus follows his answer to Peter with this parable of the unforgiving servant. And as we listened to the gospel, I found a few challenges, and I suppose you might have too. It sounds like the Lord, after being so merciful, is so unmerciful. That doesn't sit well. And if the only reason to forgive another is so that I'm not punished, is that really what God wants? Perhaps the parable isn't just about the servant. Look deeper and ask yourself, who am I in this parable? Am I the servant? Am I the Lord? Am I the other slave who asks for forgiveness? Overall, the message is about being forgiven and forgiving others. So how do we do that? When I think about my understanding of forgiveness, it is clear to me that I have learned about forgiveness from my life's experience. If I am able to forgive at all, it is because I have been forgiven. I know how it feels to have my debts canceled, my credit restored, and my relationships renewed. It is an incredible experience. And I also know it is never entirely of my own doing. When I have needed to be forgiven, all I can do is ask. And forgiveness comes from outside myself. It is as a gift from someone whom I have hurt. They too have decided that keeping the relationship is more important than continuing to be angry, resentful, or holding a grudge against me. That is true grace. It doesn't always happen, that's true. I have found that when people say they have forgiven someone, but then have less and less to do with that person, it appears more indifference than forgiveness. I don't know why that happens, but I have experienced that too. I also know that when I am the one to forgive, it feels like I'm in God's grace-filled presence. And once I have felt that grace in forgiving someone else, why wouldn't I go on forgiving? It would be like refusing to share food or forgetting to breathe. And I also know from my life's experience that the person you are forgiving doesn't always need to be there or to know. For example, if someone has died or is no longer living near you, and yet you are still holding on to hurt, resentment, or anger, can you, with God's grace, forgive and release both of you from that knot, that energy that holds you bound to each other through your hurt, through your fear of letting go, through your fear it may mean it meant nothing? I can only say that the act of forgiving truly from the heart, you find a freedom and a peace that you never knew was possible. So Peter was coming to the understanding, the true understanding, to do unto others as God has already done for you. We have already been forgiven. There is nothing we need to do to earn this. You are already loved and forgiven. We say it in the Lord's Prayer. We experience it when we share in communion. We know that we are loved. We only need to accept God's love and forgiveness for a full and grace-filled life.